Hi.
Thank you for looking up.
Hi, John.
Hang on.
All right, I'm just going to mute everybody so I can get a nice clean sound as we start the meeting. Okay, I've now muted everybody, so if you need to speak, you can just unmute yourself. So hello and welcome to the meeting of the Rotary Club of Leicester on the 23rd of November. Just before we start, I'll mention Bernard Greaves is not feeling too well today, so he wanted to join, but he couldn't. But he will be joining hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So I'll send him a message. Do we have any visiting Rotarians? I know we have Pam Spokes with us today. So hello, Pam.
We also have Paul Bonnet, who's
yes,
now
we also have a visiting Rotarian from Merseyside, because I'm no longer a member of the Rotary Club of Leicester.
That's great. Great to have you back, Paul. So when do you meet your new club?
I've already met my new club. We meet on a Thursday evening at 8 o'clock, and there is a restaurant that we are planning to go to as and when we can, probably in 2022 when we're out of lockdown, but that's okay. So no, I am now officially a member of the Rotary Club of Crosby, which is based up in Merseyside, which is a nice part of the world to be. And I really wanted to just take the opportunity today to say thank you so much for all the enjoyable times that I've had at the Rotary Club of Leicester. I know Mark is very upset because he's losing 2 members from his minor sports team, but I'm sure that will be an advantage rather than disadvantage, particularly when it comes to things like Jenga. But I've enjoyed my time tremendously as far as the Rotary Club of Leicester, done all sorts of things, including being president. I would hope that I would get an invite back to the past president's luncheon as and when we can do that, perhaps in 2022 or 23, whenever that may be. But I do wish you all success as far as the future, and I will be thinking of you kindly and fondly from Merseyside.
Thank you, Paul.
I just would say, since that's been raised, I've got a date, David Brunson, I've got a date in the diary. But is that not going ahead? The past presidents?
at the moment, I've not cancelled it, but I can't see us going ahead with it in January.
Okay.
But I haven't spoken to the cricket club again, but I think that my view is that we won't be able to meet in a group of 30 inside come January, but who knows?
We need to get it.
Anybody think we should move it on a bit further, or any views on this?
I think we should not be contemplating it doing before March or April. David would be more where I'm coming from.
Move it on, I think. Yeah. Okay. I'll speak.
As an interim president, how about us holding it online in January and then looking forward to actually then meeting in person?
No, that's a waste of time, Rodney. In my opinion, I think that's just a con. I think to do something like that, all this meeting online with dinners, it's a load of bananas. If you like, if you ask me, I think we should leave it until we can actually meet properly.
So we'll put Paul as undecided then, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll speak to them and try and find another date, maybe in April, maybe. See where Easter falls.
Okay. Rodney, did you any greetings from other clubs?
Greetings from President Sarita and the members of Leicester Novus.
Thank you, Pam.
And what President Bryan and the members of the Rotary Club of Crosby. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, and perhaps Rodney, would you like to mention your evening yesterday with the charity bike ride by a Rotarian?
Yes, if I can share the PowerPoint as we discussed. Mine's disabled.
Oh, yeah. Let me just set you to share. 1 second. That's done.
Get there in a moment. As most of you have seen, and some of you may have read Barry's message last night, we had a visiting Rotarian to our area last night at the end of a 5,000 mile bicycle ride. This is Nala Summers, who's a member of a Rotary Club of social inspiration, I think, in the Portsmouth area. She's just completed in Leicester, really good place to honour us by finishing there. It was going to be London for some reason, but came to us. And what she's been doing is her ride is to promote Sunshine People, a social movement for kindness, a cause designed to encourage, share and promote kindness and improve mental well-being across the globe. She had actually wanted to finish on the 17th of November because that's World Kindness Day. This is the bike. This is not her, but this is the bicycle that she was riding. It is applicable to particularly to people that have some difficulty, I believe, with their ankles. So I was told. And she arrived as it was requested. I met her on arrival, and this is the Hilton in Leicester. I've noted that I'm taking a good social distance from her there because we had two policemen who were also there. And this is a photograph that we then took in the Hilton Hotel, showing her bicycle there. So it was really good to see her and the effort that she put in, and it's nice to have more young Rotarians around, and I'm glad that Leicester could be of service.
That's fantastic. What a great effort. And especially with, I think, the prevalence of people feeling lonely and all the issues around being stuck at home now, it's a very relevant cause, isn't it, for her to do that? So that's great. So did she get awarded? Sorry, go on, Patrick.
Did we give greetings last week from Hounslow? I think 5 or 6 of us joined Hounslow's 91st charter online. The link there being that one of their founder members was Frederick Attenborough, who transferred to our club in 1935 when he became principal of the University College. And there was an extremely good talk by Michael Attenborough, Richard's son.
Yes, it was a very good talk. No, I don't think we did give greetings, but it was a very good talk. I'm not sure if they recorded it, but maybe if they did, it would be handy to perhaps share that link out. It was a very good, engaging speech.
Yeah.
Okay, we have an EGM at this point. Did everybody get the document that Barry sent round with the amendments to the club's constitution? So the EGM is that the club adopts the amendments as set out in red in the draft constitution circulated to members on the 17th of November, primarily introducing changes to allow for corporate membership. Could I have a proposer? Yes, Diana? And a seconder? Yes, Louise? Could I vote for all those in favour? Okay. Anybody not? Okay, great, that's passed. I'll just quickly go through some of my remarks. So on the hampers, that's going very well. We've now had all 5 food banks have responded. So just to update, that's the Zinthia Trust over in Highfields, Age UK in the centre of Leicester, Help the Homeless also, centre of Leicester. We've got Open Hands on London Road and Midlands Longer service, Save Our Service. So they're all accepting either, it's a mixture of either we can drop to them. One of them today has said they will collect from us. So it's a case of, if you'd like to donate a hamper, speak to Scott and he can update you as to how each food bank is accepting deliveries or perhaps doing collections. So yeah, we've got a great project going there. I think if Scott's here, maybe you could just tell us how many hampers we've had so far. Scott there? But I know it's at least 10, coming up to 15 now, so that's gone very well. And yeah, so if you'd like to do one, just speak to him. And there's also a news page on the website. You can read more about it. The volunteering side is also going very well. So the Midlands Lunga service, they run deliveries at 3 p.m. on a Sunday. And I've been to the last 3. Very straightforward. Took me an hour to do. Just pick up about 30 pre-prepared meals, which included a hot meal of a curry and some rice, some fruit, water, that sort of thing. And all I had to do was collect them from the back of a restaurant on London Road and go to 3 hotels and hostels and just drop them off. So it's very, very easy to do and very worthwhile. The other food banks have come back to me about possibly volunteering with them as well. And the 2 of the others have requested drivers for Christmas for just getting food deliveries and things out. So again, if anybody's interested, please give me a shout and I can tell you a bit more about which food banks require volunteers for helping them out over Christmas. On the Road Track Club, which we're setting up, we're now going through the paperwork to just get that going. I believe, Nick, you spoke to Beatrice this week. Beatrice is a student at De Montfort University. She's studying political science. Yes, Nick?
Yes, pretty successful meeting, really. We went through the whole business of filling in forms to set up the Rotaract Club. She is still in the process of recruiting people who are interested. I've said to her that we could do with 10 or 12 people who are keen to set the club up before we actually submit the forms. The whole business of the paperwork associated with constitution and agreeing bylaws will then follow on, and I'm doing a bit of research as to what university Rotary clubs ought to look like in that respect. So it's moving ahead. The only trouble is that we're getting closer and closer to Christmas. I don't see this is going to be in place before January now. She's flying home to Madeira on the 13th of December. And I imagine she'll have to, actually I'm not sure, she may well have to isolate before when she comes back, but that shouldn't stop being able to talk to her, of course. So it's coming on. And Parmdeep, how many people have you seen so far on recruiting, on actually doing any volunteering work?
Well, through her and her friends, we've had 5 now have been out for various things with me. She actually came out with me yesterday to do this food delivery, and she still seemed very keen. And she just said she's got a few assignments at this point in time, which have kept her busy. That's the only reason she's been a little bit slow with the paperwork, but she's very happy. I did mention to her we need some photos and things, which we took yesterday of her actually volunteering. So I did say to her, it'd be a lot easier to recruit others when you've actually done it yourself and you can show them and talk about it. So that's one of the main reasons I got her to come with me. This Wednesday, me, her, and an employee of De Montfort University, we've got a webinar going out to the DMU alumni. So I contacted them and told them about how some of the students are helping out with our projects, and they were very keen to promote that out to their base of volunteers. So I think we won't have any trouble once we get DMU itself involved from Wednesday, recruiting further volunteers. So quite confident we'll be okay on that front.
On DMU, I did actually speak to Alistair Blair just under a week ago, I think, who offered his services as the university advisor for the Rotaract Club. But we are thinking in terms of actually expanding this to the 2 universities in Leicester, because I had somebody contact me from Leicester University, and she too is hunting down people who would be interested in being part of it. So we're thinking of that it's going to be called the Rotary Club of Leicester Universities.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be great. So that's going well. Thanks for your efforts in that, Nick. Simon is in the process of setting up a bridge evening. Do we have any bridge players here? If you could just put your hands up, just so I can get a feel for. So that's about 5 there. And Nick, keep your hands up if you can. Okay, so there's about 5 or 6, I think. Would anybody like to learn to play who doesn't play? Okay, yeah, 1 or 2 of those. So yeah, I think we can get up to maybe 7 or 8, I think. And Simon, do we have an evening yet set, or we're going to do a pilot?
I was waiting. Well, we started with only 4 of us, and I was waiting for Scott to come back on my request just to try out bridge base. But he's not come back to me yet. I was hoping he'd be with us today, but he doesn't seem to be. So I'll chase him up. We'll get started. Richard Power, yourself, and Scott, and then we'll widen it out to those who also want to join in. I'm not going to be a teacher. I don't have the requisite skills, but we can point people in the right direction and we can try it.
Yes,
we've got a long winter ahead of us, and those who want to get engaged may well do.
Yes, if you're interested, sign up to bridgebase.com and then just contact Simon, because we'll be playing on there, so we can add you into the various tables and things. And it's pretty fun. I've been playing for a few years. Not very good, but that's kind of the point, really. The more you play, the better you get. So that should be fun. We've got various other initiatives and projects we're working on. We've got a...
Parmdeep,
yes,
could I just add one more thing about the bridge base thing?
Yeah.
It's important to make your table exclusive. Otherwise, you'll get all sorts of rude Americans trying to butt into your game.
Understood.
I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, they do say that in the instructions, actually. There's a little form which tells you how to play private games, and they do make it very clear you should lock everybody else out. So yeah, thanks for that. Is Tim here? Maybe a quick mention about the walks we're looking to start. I don't know if maybe Tim's not here for this one. He was here for the meeting prior, but perhaps he can mention that on the next meeting we have. Also, Scott's working very hard on music in the park and dealing with the HAMP project and various other things. Diana's kindly got one of your team to handle our Google for non-profits account. So Google have kindly given us up to $10,000 of free Google advertising that we're looking to use to advertise our various projects, events and that kind of thing. So as a non-profit, we get access to this fund, which we had to apply for, and we've now been accepted. So we'll be moving forward with that. So what that basically means is when you go into Google and type in, if I typed in volunteering in Leicester, for example, at the moment, Google just presents a bunch of options, and we can have our advert appear near the top. So somebody typing volunteering in Leicester could see an advert for the Rotary Club of Leicester or something else we're working on, and click on that and come through to our website. That would normally incur a cost. So for every time that advert is clicked, we would pay Google £1 or £2, in some cases £5. It can be quite expensive, but that's actually free for us at the moment. So we're looking just to get that. We're looking to just get that up and going. Right. Do we have anything from Secretary Barry?
Nothing that I haven't circulated already.
Okay, great. And anything else from other committee chairman? Yes, Richard. You're muted, Richard.
Just a brief Ethiopia update. For those of you following the news, you'll be aware that there's an ongoing conflict between the government and Tigray, and this is of relevance to Gondar in that Amhara is the neighbouring state, or one of the neighbouring states, and Gondar being the nearest major town with any medical facilities, are getting quite a lot of casualties. But all our stuff, we're still in regular email contact with Mohammed Yusuf, who's taken over from Ananya as the chief doctor, and all our stuff is being used and with great regularity, treating mostly all civilian casualties, but maybe the odd military fighter. So I think, you know, the reality is if we hadn't done that project, they just simply wouldn't be getting treated, and that's that. So I think it's something, although it wasn't quite the way we envisaged it all being used, it is at least satisfying to know that. I think the potential of the conflict is reaching a bit of an end game this week, but the danger is that the government fighters unleash sort of years of pent-up resentment against the Tigrayans, which could potentially get very nasty. But one hopes that sense will prevail.
Serious stuff. So is there anything more we can do for them? I mean, have the club there talked to us about any of that?
Well, there are certainly reusable stuff and things like external fixation stuff, which they are very short of. The difficulty is getting it there because medical equipment, I mean, just putting stuff it took months and months to get out there. So that's the main challenge at the moment. I am going to be having some conversations with Tim Beacon to see whether there is any way we can get any external fixation stuff out there, because I have one or two potential private donors who would help with that. But I'm not optimistic, I have to say, under the current circumstances. I think when things settle down, we'll be able to get stuff out there, but not at the moment. As much about COVID as anything else as well. There was an interesting little news item. They went through about these hundreds of casualties coming in. They couldn't resist saying at the end that they had 14 COVID patients in the hospital. I didn't really feel that the 14 COVID patients in the overall context of what they were going through was just seemed a bit odd. But anyway, there we go.
Yeah, it's a shame. Or please keep us updated, and perhaps if we can help, we should try to.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to our speaker, John Knight, who is with us, and he's going to be talking to us. He's the Chief Executive of LOROS. He's going to be giving us an update from LOROS. So please take it away, John.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's great to see so many familiar and friendly faces. So I haven't prepared a formal presentation, partly because I like it to be a conversation, and actually knowing so many people as I do, it feels better to be a conversation. So I thought I could give you a background on events within and around LOROS since March, but perhaps start very briefly for those that are maybe not quite so familiar with the hospice, just 2 minutes on the background. So as many of you know, LOROS is a 31-bed hospice. It covers the area of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, so about a population of about 1.1 million people. And there is actually a real relevance in saying that, particularly now, as I seem to spend a lot of time on Zoom and Teams calls, speaking to other chief execs who are looking after hospices, for instance, in Lancashire and South Cumbria, where there are 8 adult hospices and 2 children's hospices, all within a very close proximity of one another. Indeed, that area, there's 1.5 million people, where there are 8 adult hospices and 2 children's hospices. And with regards to cost efficiencies and government funding and so on, that does make a massive difference. I think for LOROS, it's to a degree a pressure that we have, that we are the only bedded adult hospice in such a large geography, and the pressure therefore upon our beds. But on the other hand, to have such a large community with LOROS as the only hospice with beds, I think we're blessed in many ways that we have such a large community wrapped around the hospice. So the 5th largest hospice in the country out of 220, and of course all the other services that we have that many of you will know. So day therapy, having up to 25 patients a day coming in for day therapy in the world pre-COVID. A lymphedema service, a counselling and bereavement support service, our community nurse specialist team, a home visiting volunteering service, the complementary therapy team with everything from Indian head massage to aromatherapy and all sorts of other complementary therapies, the chaplaincy team, and outpatient appointments that we do both independently and in association with UHL as well. So, yeah, in sort of in regards to the big picture of hospices, we're up there sort of head and shoulders with the larger organisations across the country. So I guess what would be of most interest to people is what's been happening during the COVID period. In March, like everyone really, this came out the blue and came down the tracks very quickly towards us. And when lockdown was announced, we had to quickly, quickly move from a service where everything was happening to actually closing all the services bar our provision of the ward, the 31 beds on the ward. So initially we went to providing, well, actually no service outside of the ward. And then we quickly changed that into telephone support. And then like the rest of the world, we learned about Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And since that time, we've been supporting patients at home through virtual mediums as well as telephone support. With regard to the ward, we endeavoured to retain 31 beds, but quite a number of interesting things have happened. When lockdown occurred and visiting had to be severely restricted, what we found was that rather than normally we would run at about 28, 29 beds full all the time, we dropped down to about 9 or 10 beds being utilised. And the feedback was quite often that the restriction around visiting made LOROS not the most attractive place to have your loved one come for end-of-life care. And also the fear of placing somebody at end of life into, I guess, an environment where COVID could be present. So the knock-on effect was that for a period of time, we found ourselves feeling greatly underutilized. So we had a full staff team. We were here and ready to respond to requests for end-of-life care, but actually the requests were very limited in coming forwards. For a period of time, we then moved to numbers increasing, and I think at our most challenging point, we probably had about 8 or 9 patients at one time who did have COVID, and we moved to having a red zone and a green zone, or hot and cold as some people refer to it. So we had patients completely isolated who had COVID, and a team, a bespoke team using a separate entrance and separate changing facilities and hygiene facilities, working purely with COVID patients, and then another team working with those at end of life who did not have COVID, and going through the tried and tested testing regimes of testing people as they enter the hospice, and then after 5 days and after 13 days and so forth, to keep retesting patients. So there was a period of time when we were quite surprised really to find ourselves at that low ebb, and then as time went on, numbers started to come back. I mean, of course, our priority was very much about protecting the patients, protecting staff, and maintaining services where we could. The other thing that was very significant was, of course, volunteering stopped. And we've always been really, I think, privileged and proud to have anywhere north of 1,200 active volunteers. And to suddenly say to all of those people, actually, you can't come in and volunteer on reception or in the snack bar, or do driving to bring patients in, or help feed patients on the ward, or help in fundraising events. For a lot of those people, that was really a very sad and quite life-changing effect that we had by saying we just cannot take the risk of having volunteers coming in and out the hospice. The other immediate effect was that we, I mean, in a way, COVID came at, it could never have been at a convenient time, but for us, in the build-up to some of our largest fundraising events of the year, our biggest fundraising event has always been the Twilight Walk. And for the previous 2 years, it had returned after costs a quite incredible amount of £152,000 each year of profit from the Twilight Walk. So we knew straight away that losing the Twilight Walk and losing one or two other events, eventually the Leicester Marathon, the Leicester to Skegness bike ride, we identified in the first week or so, £1.1 million of voluntary income had just been lost through COVID. And actually now what we know is across the whole financial year to the end of March, it will be 2.5 million of voluntary income that we've lost through the change or the loss of events, through the closure of shops. Of course, we closed all 29 of our shops for the entire period of lockdown, and now through November as well. So in addition to managing the change around patient care and the reconfiguration of services, we were also thinking, how do we counter quite a loss of, a significant loss of income? Just to put that in context for you, we would spend around £10 million a year on patient care. 2.3 million comes from the local clinical commissioning groups, and the rest we generate ourselves. So, you know, big impact. 2.3 million of that circa 7.7 million was quite an impact, or is quite an impact. So our strategy, which we developed quickly, was that we clearly had to alter the events that we could do as much as we could. So the Twilight Walk, for example, became a Twilight in, and we did that virtually, and that the team did an amazing job of very quickly going online. That in the end brought in 50,000 for us, which is absolutely fantastic, but significantly different from 150,000. And then we've done other events like the Leicester Skegness bike ride. We just asked people to go out and ride independently 35 miles to celebrate 35 years of hospice, or indeed the 100 miles to cover the figurative distance of Leicester to Skegness. But what we did have to do, because the effect was so immediate, was that we looked at a series of voluntary and then compulsory redundancies. But our aim was twofold. One was to not affect patient care. And then secondly, whilst we have about 6 months of reserves in the bank for LOROS, and with friends in the room today, that would be about 5.5 million that we have in reserves. What we said is we want to navigate our way through this pandemic, and whilst the reserves are there, we are not minded to draw upon them if we can at all avoid it. And I certainly know other hospices that, in my mind, drag their toes into looking at reshaping services and undertaking a redundancy process, who started spending their reserves and still have had to go through redundancies at the end of it. So my take on it as chief exec is we, if you like, we're on the front foot, and we very much attack the situation. So in total, and sadly, we made 31 people redundant, either through a voluntary process or compulsory process, predominantly voluntary. Over 20 were voluntary. And they came from the support services around the organisation, so not directly patient care. In fact, we ring-fenced the doctors and the nurses from any form of redundancy. So that was part of the strategy. That and implementing a cost efficiency program where we targeted 3% of every department's budget. We hit our target of 1.1 million and actually now have exceeded that. So I'm really pleased that through, I suppose, an assertive process of looking at the issue and then tackling it, we have successfully done that. We formed 4 groups that we called tomorrow teams. So we had an income generation tomorrow team, which is as it sort of, the definition, if you know, what is it? It's the name is what it says on the tin, which was around looking at how do we generate income now and in the future in a new world. We had a financial management tomorrow team saying we need to manage those funds even more strictly than we have historically and be able to project forward the cash flow and the pinch points for the organisation. We had a clinical tomorrow team looking at service delivery and the redesign of services in this new world that we're living in. And then we had an organisational structure tomorrow team that was looking at, well, with the money we know we can get, with the financial management of that money, with the service design, what does the organisation need to look like in the future. So those 4 teams were not siloed. They worked separately and then came together to sort of share information and create a strategic plan. Again, said nicely, that's been very successful, I have to say, to marry projected income against service design, against organisational structure. We've been very lucky, the community, I'm sure, again, thank you to anybody on the call who's been supportive of LOROS, but the community have been phenomenal in supporting us. We clearly use the furlough scheme. I think at our height, we had about 137 people on furlough. We use the retail grant scheme and the rates relief scheme. And then at the NHS through Hospice UK contributed quite a significant amount of money against all hospices that were making losses through their voluntary income. And that was a commitment at the time. And I'm conscious that, Martin, you may have, an in-depth knowledge of this from your career, but at the time what the NHS said to us is, we will help any hospice out, but you need to commit 80% of your bed capacity to us should we need to use it. And of course we were very willing to do that. So that relationship is sort of at the moment in negotiation as to whether that will continue or not up to the end of March. And then, of course, as we all know, come September, October time, we were really happy. We were reopening services. So we were back to having about 6 people a day into day therapy. Volunteers were returning. We had people driving and bringing patients in. We had volunteers back on reception. The gardens were being done again by volunteers. But the lockdown in November has completely thrown us back to how we were in the previous lockdown. So currently we have no other services other than the ward, and then the telephone and the virtual services that, if you like, were part of the preliminary lockdown. We're preparing to reopen all of our shops in December. So next Tuesday, hopefully we'll get going again on the shops, and we will get back to having patients in the hospice here. What's been really reassuring is almost to a person, everybody has said, whether they're a volunteer or whether they're a patient in day therapy, I want to come back to the organisation. I want to volunteer. I love coming to day therapy. When can we come back again? So our driver has been to do that in a COVID safe way. And, I very much hope we will get back to that in December and we can sustain it. Interestingly, the one area that has continued through this lockdown as face-to-face is our education team delivering education to the junior doctors through the university. So they still come in to the training centre and have face-to-face education from our team as we speak, actually. And that's been, maybe sensibly, but that's been the one face-to-face activity that's never changed. I guess with the hunger for newly qualified doctors to be thoroughly trained. So in summary, and I'd love to answer questions that may be more interesting for you. In summary, we did stabilise LOROS, and we stabilised that by taking, if you like, affirmative early action. We have managed to do that predominantly without dipping into the reserves. We are fairly confident of the next 18 months, pending other lockdowns. As I say, the November lockdown, just to give you a context, 1 month lockdown for us is about £200,000 of voluntary income. So every month is a big knock for us. So assuming we're not having further lockdowns, we feel like we've stabilised the ship for the next 18 months without thinking about going to the reserves of the organisation. But we are far from complacent, because if I ask my income generation team now, tell me what money you will generate from our events, our traditional events next year, I think they would all look back at me with a slight bemusement. Do we think next April's Twilight Walk will occur? We don't know. Do we think we can run the Leicester Marathon next October? We don't know, etc., etc. I'll pause there, but would really, really welcome any questions. And again, thank you for your time this lunchtime.
Great, thank you, John. Do we have any questions from members? And if you would like to ask a question, just put your hand up. And yes, John. You'll need to. There we go.
John, good to hear from you. As you know, my dear wife is in your care even as we speak, and I'm very grateful for all you're doing. But it did occur to me that government, central government, seemed to be giving grants ad lib and willy-nilly, and I wondered whether the hospice movement had separate grants from central government to help you.
Yes, John, that's true. So Tracy Bleakley is the head of Hospice UK. To a degree, she has a bit of a thankless job because Hospice UK have no authority over any hospice. We're all independent, if you like, voluntary members, and they're purely an umbrella body.
Right.
I think she has had some bad press across the voluntary sector because she was very quick to go to government and Nick Hancock and negotiate a deal to support hospices. And I think other members of the voluntary sector, I'm guessing, but British Heart Foundation and others would say, hey, well, that's all good for hospices. What about us? Yeah. I mean, to be frank, our voluntary income, as I've just discussed, was so immediately hard hit that when she sent an email saying I've negotiated this deal. So what they actually offered us was against our 2018 accounts, what voluntary income you generated, they were going to support you to that degree month by month, but only on a short-term basis. So that's ended now. That ended in July.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Richard.
Hi, John. I'd just like to ask you about this policy about the visiting, because it does leave me confused in that my assumption that LOROS is there to provide the best quality, a horrible term, but end-of-life experience, if you like, rather than necessarily keep people alive as long as possible. Therefore, an end-of-life experience for most people, I assume, means having their relatives come in and come go and be with them as much as possible. And so therefore, this trade-off saying, what we must stop anything happening is you getting COVID. You must not get COVID and die of COVID, and therefore we're going to stop all your relatives coming in to see you. And I'm talking from personal experience. One of my closest friends and colleagues, he did actually get home before he actually died, but he couldn't have any members of his family in apart from his wife, and he was devastated by that. And it strikes me as though this fear of COVID has overtaken all other sort of aspects of human care. And I just wonder whether LOROS is considering reviewing that policy.
Yeah, Richard, thank you. It's a really difficult subject, and as you'd expect, I'll answer you honestly. Starting with, before this November lockdown, we, because I think, I'm not sure set against other hospices, but I think LOROS probably had more cases of COVID within the building and more of impact on our staff than perhaps many other hospices. We did a piece of research or questionnaire with the staff team, the nursing team, and one of the most resounding things they said to us was how upsetting it had been just against their values and their behaviours to see people dying without relatives in the room, and as nurses to have to then phone the families and say that's what had happened. And it was completely contrary. I mean, I'm sure you believe me when they were telling us that in tears, that was just not why they work at a place like LOROS. So we did set off saying during the main lockdown, you could have a visit, a settling in visit, and then a visit at end of life, as difficult as that was to plan. We then moved to fixed visiting times, and it was 2 people for an hour and a half a day that we did through the bulk of the lockdown period. And one of the pressures in the organisation, trying to put time around it, Richard, was that some of our staff were better at applying those time than others. So you'd have a patient who might strictly have an hour and a half, and then another patient with different nurses who weren't brave enough to say, sorry, you're an hour and a half's up, you've got to go now. And they ended up with a longer visit. And that was being pointed out to us that it wasn't equitable. So we've had to try and enforce that more rigidly. But of course, now there's a new lockdown. We've gone back to that settling in visit and a visit towards the end of life, or extraordinary visits where people have requested them. I'm not sure actually I've answered your question. I don't think it's ideal. My director of care is, I suppose, very conscious that we're not seen to almost step away from the national guidelines or the national norm, and will we be criticised if we have a sort of I dare say, a freer and easier view of visiting? Do come back to me, because I'm not sure I answered your question.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because one of my jobs now in UHL is talking to relatives of patients who've died in UHL and indeed LOROS over the last 2 or 3 months, as you know, because we've taken over the ME service. And almost universally, the relatives will say the care that their relative received was absolutely second to none. But the one thing that distresses everybody is the inability to visit, and particularly elderly patients who can't manage FaceTime and all these other things. And as you say, they are in tears talking to them. And it strikes me as we just need to regain some sense of balance about humanity between the length of life and how you live or how you die. And it isn't just LOROS, it's across the board.
Richard, if again, it feels slightly a substandard answer, but I don't know if you do know Dr. Feathers, Luke Feathers, perhaps to get in some dialogue around that would be a good thing. Of course, we're not trying to be obstructive. I guess there's a fear of us being seen to be a bit laissez-faire about it.
I accept you're in a very difficult position, and it's the sort of national perspective versus the personal approach.
Just to give you, and I'm sorry, I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time, but to give you another example, when this new lockdown came along, so we collect a lot of money through people who play the weekly lottery, and many of them who are older lottery playing members like their weekly collection of their donation, their pound. And so we have door-to-door lottery collectors. Now, we decided that it would be contrary to the government's wishes for us to carry on having volunteers, because of course volunteering was deemed to be okay, having volunteers going around the community, knocking on a door, collecting money, doing the lottery round. Now, that has a probably £12,000 effect for us during the month, but we decided not to do it because we thought we'd be breaking the understood national norm that really the threat of spreading COVID by knocking on people's doors wasn't the right thing to do. You wouldn't believe how much controversy that caused internally about losing income that we need set against, having people walking around the community with donors, the very generous people saying, I don't care, come to my door, collect the money, I'll take the risk, I want you to have my money.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah. Do we have time for one more quick question? Okay, well, thank you, John. And it seems like you're navigating some difficult waters at this present time, and I wish you all the best. And I'm sure it's going to be a task you're up to. So, I mean, for next year, like you said, it's going to be very difficult to plan ahead for your events and your shops. I mean, how do you see your shops running for next year in terms of the number of people you can get in there and serve and everything else?
What's been interesting is when we've reopened the shops in the local communities, so areas like Anstey and Baby and so on, have done really well. In fact, actually, Ashby shop is trading above the pre-COVID budget, so it's performing better than ever. The city centre shops have traded terribly. In fact, they're barely break even. So I do wonder if city centres continue to suffer at the hands of COVID, whether long term it will be more, if you like, the community, the small localised shops that will be the ones that we have to focus on in the future. And online, of course, we, like I'm sure everybody else, our online activity has increased, and it never ceases to amaze me how much people will buy in terms. So we only do donated goods online, and probably trade about £1,200 a week of donated goods online, and that's, you know, an area that we intend to push on and grow. So probably a greater online presence, less of a city centre presence in the future, and more localised shops.
Right. Okay. Well, I wish you all the best with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time, everybody.
And yours, especially. Thank you. So attendance today, we've got 27, which is a great turnout. Thank you, everyone. Next week, we have Nikolai Foster, the Artistic Director of The Curve, talking to us about the Curve during COVID-19. And I'm just going to ask everybody to unmute yourselves, please. And just so we can all say goodbye to each other. So thank you all for your attendance today. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, John.
Paul, good luck, Sue.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Sue.